Sorry, I was gonna start closer to 2. It's like 3:50 right now. Obvious reasons. But I have something I wrote that I sent over to get checked before I post anything, before I say anything. I put out my initial thoughts, but you know, I want that to be looked over. I still have things I could say. It's just a matter of what I can say, because ideally I would like to just go line by line and be like, this is what I think of this. This is what I think of that. This is what I know about this. But obviously I'm not going to say every little thing. What I'll say is, you know, I want to give as much info as I can while still keeping myself safe. I don't want to be like, oh, I just won't say anything, blah, 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 because I feel like I've always been someone who tries to keep you guys informed, to keep proper information going. If I don't say anything, then a lot of misinfo is just what gets spread. And I think a lot of people could get hurt on all sides could get hurt a lot worse or in ways they shouldn't. So I'm just trying to be a voice of reason there. I don't love, like, you know, whenever someone else has drama, I don't like talking about it. I only talk about things that pertain to me, and I love not talking about stuff. But when it's something that could cause people issues, I flip, and I'm like, all right, I actually will talk a lot. So apologies, because I know my community is not used to me sitting there ruminating on stupid dramatic shit. Though I wouldn't consider this drama, which is why I'm talking about it, right? Just apologies. I don't know. I hate circling on things that are like that, like negative. We talk about like video games and I don't know, the Pennsylvania ice trade or whatever the fuck. But, you know, there's some things that if I'm highly concerned something is at a certain level, I can talk about a little more. There are things that if I see something already outed, I could talk a bit more. If I'm worried that something could be harmful and I want to clarify it, I could talk a bit more, etc. So, you know, I'm just going over that. But yeah, I typed out my initial thoughts at the very least, and then I've sent those over to be looked at. I will talk a little, I guess. Vast amount of this I just do not believe. I will also say this is the person who I would hear from friends every convention they went to. Oh yeah, he covered our dinner. It was so cool. We all had dinner and he covered the whole bill. Yeah, he sent me home in an Uber. He paid for Uber Black. I'm used to hearing these things for a long time. This is someone who has other monetization sources and stuff outside of all this stuff. So I'm not saying that's where it went. I'm not even saying that. I'm saying this person has this money, whether it's that exact money or other money from other business ventures. This is a person who has been doing fine financially from what we've seen. And I think it's a lot easier for someone like that to stand up there and go, I take responsibility, when they, by all accounts that I've heard and seen, seem to be doing fine. You know, whether he ends up being financially affected by this or not, you know, there are a lot of people, not just him, there are a lot of people who've already made their money. If the company is closing this month, what that means is there are a lot of people who have been on and paid through this time. There's some who took pay cuts. There's some who didn't get paid here and there as well. But there are people who have been paid this whole time. There's some people who've been, you know, they stopped a couple months ago or whatever, but they were getting paid up until then. There are people who did a lot throughout their time there. There are people who did a lot of nothing. Also, no, guys, do not say stupid ass legal shit unless you are a lawyer advising me, because you are my lawyer, okay? In chat, I want to make that clear. A lot of people spreading a lot of misinformation about NDAs and how they work. The majority of comments I see about it are completely incorrect. But I googled it. At Grok, is this real? Okay, I've replied. All right, so tweet from Gunrun. It's on the VShojo account, but it's signed off as from Gunrun, so anything I say relating to it really is to him, not addressing the whole company. This is what he wrote. I assume he wrote probably PR, lawyer, whatever, assisting. He wrote, VShojo's failed. I've mismanaged the company into the situation you're all witnessing. So today I'm sharing the difficult news that VShojo is shutting down, and I take full responsibility for the decisions that led us to this point. I want to say, saying you take responsibility verbally is cool and all. It changes nothing about the situation. It changes absolutely nothing. Do I think it's nice to say this? Yes. Do I think the person who is ultimately responsible should say this? Yes. However, their words. That's it. I've been doing everything I can to fundraise and right the ship these past few months, but despite my efforts, we are in a worse position, and those I care about are now paying the price. Yeah, I mean, the only stuff that's been visible to me this whole time to right the ship has been attempts at fundraising, and, you know, some staff leaving because they were like not really able to get paid anymore, or whatever the reasoning is. Those are the best efforts. And that's pretty much, from what I know, from what I'm aware of, what his job has been the whole time, is to just keep trying to find fundraising. I have not really seen many other efforts to make things profitable. There was like one other effort that was a good idea, but was executed very poorly and went not well. So even if the idea here and there was good. The execution made that impossible to work out. So therefore, the only thing that was really being done in a positive direction was fundraising from the perspective that I had. He continues, over the past few years, we raised around 11 million to pursue a bold. I want to say that was one time, that was an initial seed round investment. I asked questions about that, and that was just the seed round, and that was it. To pursue a bold, talent-first approach in VTubing, prioritizing creators and community over short-term profits to achieve long-term sustainability. I don't know why he's writing this. It just sounds like another advertisement for a company that's not going to exist. Mentioning the 11 million investment is fine. Talent-first approach, this has been disproven in many ways. I do think a lot of the staff attempted this genuinely. I think things in our contracts, some of it reflected that, you know, in relation to like us owning our IPs, I guess. Our funding went directly to our creators through generous splits, debut investments, infrastructure, concerts, events, and staffing, all designed to support them. Okay, generous splits, I cannot comment right now on exact splits or anything. I think that's a bad idea. I will say, is it better than what I've heard about from some other VTuber companies? Yes. However, I don't think we should ever in this industry compare how anything goes to other VTuber companies as if there's some magical different thing from regular talent agencies. A standard talent agency and talent management company in the Western sphere, usually the splits are a lot better, and things are just, it's just that model. I think taking this company and comparing it to VTubing agencies is a really good way to make it look better. That's what I think about that. Debut investments, yeah, I mentioned that they covered a little bit of stuff for my debut. I already paid a lot of it myself before that time as well, and they covered some things by the time I decided I was joining. Infrastructure, what infrastructure? A lot of the stuff that I know I took advantage of was stuff that third parties had, that maybe they were helping us out for free, or maybe some of them did get paid a little bit, I don't know. Concerts, yeah, there was one, it happened before I joined, so I wasn't part of it. I did sit in VC with everyone and watched it, which was cool. Any other concerts after that were not anything that this company paid for, that was the talents themselves, like Mouse's concert, Michi's concert, right? Their own individual ones. Those were their concerts. The funding did not go to those. It only went to the first one. I'm pretty sure from what I've heard from members, they paid for those themselves. Events, what events do you guys remember? At least in my time there, which was basically the past 2 years. Maid Cafe, maybe? Getting some standees and having us do some con walkarounds, maybe paying for, not Oscar walking us around, that was his own thing, but paying for, like, if we had the robot, maybe renting that or something. I don't know if we owned that or not. We might have owned one of those bots, maybe. Nikkei collab? No, that was a sponsorship. Nikkei paid us. The company's funding did not cover that. And staffing, this is true. One of my major concerns was the amount of money going towards staff. We had a lot of staff, and I thought that was cool and all, but I didn't think we could afford it. I also only knew a few staff members the entire time I was there. I, within the last few months, received an org chart that showed me who all the remaining staff at that time were, and a list of what they did, and there were so many names on there that I didn't know. I'll read out some parts of my written statement in a moment to go over some of that stuff. It said all designed to support them. I'm sorry, I just don't feel like 11 million's worth of support was really given to the members that were there from the beginning. I feel like a lot of that went into things that didn't really provide for them in the end. We also wanted talent to own their IP. I mean, why are we even saying this? This is something that is standard for any talent agency in the Western sphere. The only time this doesn't happen, for the most part, in this industry and in content creation tends to be with some JP VTuber agencies, but this is a Western one, so this is not anything incredible to mention. Which we knew was a unique creator-first approach for an agency. Again, not unique for an agency. Maybe for a VTuber agency when comparing to the other two big ones, and that's it. Despite all our efforts, the business failed to generate the revenue we needed to sustain that model, and eventually we ran out of money. Yeah, this is true. Their efforts were efforts in the wrong direction. I think they had some times where they were trying new things that maybe would make money. I pointed out multiple times how those weren't going to work. I didn't think they were going to work. I thought they were kind of dead in the water, and they still spent money on them and worked on them, and I said, I don't see the point. And then they would like drop the ideas or realize they have to pivot or it wouldn't work out. And then I was like, okay, well, we already spent the money on it, right? Okay, and then additionally, I acknowledge that some of the money spent by the company was raised in connection with talent activity, which I later learned was intended for a charitable initiative. Look, I'm gonna need a receipt to know when this was found out or something to make me believe this. Is this possible? Maybe. I'm gonna need to see something. If I had money of mine that in some way went into the company, they knew what it was for. This was a weird case because typically you send charity money straight to a service to get it to them first. This was in relation to Mouse's subathon, which means somehow she had to get money that went to her for subscriptions. It had to get over to the charity and having, like that go to them first. This was a weird case with how the payment worked. But it was said on stream what was going on. A lot of this was talked about and publicly known, right? And we talked about, oh yeah, half is going to go to charity and all of this. The only way he could have maybe not known about anything is if he literally had his eyes closed, which I do think he did a lot of the time while doing his work, and I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah. So at the time, we were working hard to raise additional investment capital to cover our costs. This is true. They were trying to raise investments because it seems to be the only strategy that they were able to really do here. And I firmly believed, based on the information available to us, that we would be able to do so and cover all expenses. I don't know why he firmly believed that. Again, I'm no stranger to startups. Most startups fail. Most startups, after their first investment, do not get invested in again, and they end up closing. This is standard. To make it past that and get a second investment is on the more rare side. And you have to be able to prove to investors reasons why they should believe that you are going to soon, or with additional investment, become, over time, profitable. I knew some about what I had been told, and I was able to see that we were not on that track and had no solid plans to become, properly on this track. I was like, there's no way an investor would look at this and think this is good. So either this is a lie or he actually was that incompetent. Pick one. I don't know. We were unsuccessful in our fundraising efforts. I made the decision to pursue funding, and I own its consequences. He was not the only person in those discussions. I know people that I spoke directly to in meetings who talked about they would use the word, we are trying to do this, we are pursuing funding. Other individuals who also were talking to people about these things. I do think it is ultimately on him as the CEO. Absolutely. Yes. But he's not the only person who did this stuff. Says, I'm deeply sorry to all the talent, staff, friends, and community members who believed in our brand. You did not deserve this. I will say that I think the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I am not absolving him of anything here. I do think he started out actually thinking he could do this. Genuinely. That being said, I mean, what are we saying here? Pleading face emoji, I'm so sorry. What? I talked about this yesterday. I had meetings with leadership, and this does not mean only him, with leadership, talking about my thoughts on how things were going and how it was not going to go well, and I was concerned. At that time, if it was known that things were going so poorly, someone could have made the call to cut the losses, to say, we need to cut a lot of staff right now. That's our big spend is staff salaries. We need to cut certain projects. These are big spends as well. Let's liquidate some things that we have, whatever. See what our money situation is. Pay money out to talent so that we're getting close to or not as much in debt. Maybe pay the charity first. Talk to us about it and go, look, we owe this money to you guys, but we also owe to charity. Here's what we want to do. We could have just talked about it. It still would have been bad. It would have been less bad. And a conscious decision was made to not do that. Anyway, I'm going to read my reply now. This is what I replied to the tweet. VShojo didn't just fail. Many staff and leadership failed VShojo. I'm not going to name any specific people for the record. I don't want to point fingers at anyone right now. There's more information that's needed. And even then, I don't know if I want to be the one worrying about that stuff. But I just want that to be known, that this is not just one person. It's impossible for this to have been one person and no one else knew, right? Do I think some of those other people maybe had the power to do anything? Probably not for a lot of them. That's really case by case for each person. But, I think we shouldn't pretend that he's the only person in this situation, right? I said, instead of using talent money on operating costs, the company should have shut down, or at least informed us, but you instead used us as cash cows to keep things afloat while keeping us in the dark. Again, this was a conscious decision. You chose to keep the expensive sinking ship going and felt it was fine to keep paying out to staff you were friends with instead of putting talent first. You made it abundantly clear that you're okay with not prioritizing the debts owed to the talent who made this company what it is. Again, this was a conscious decision. While saying you will take full responsibility is the correct thing to do, I also think there are many others in the company without the same positive intent as conveyed in this message. In every leadership or staff call I had, You sat back and didn't say much while you had other staff members that were clearly the ones doing the actual work be the ones to speak. Again, I sat in meetings with people, or some of them weren't just me, were other members as well, hearing other people talk about a lot of these things. Maybe not to the extent that we know now, obviously. A lot of this is newer information, some of the recent stuff, but knowing that there were issues, bringing up concerns, there were other people answering our questions. There were other people who were sitting there talking to us about our concerns, so they knew what our concerns were. Whether or not they actually could help is a different story. Some of them just did not have the ability to do anything about that. We did not only talk to him. There was one meeting where we did just talk straight to him, and I spoke to my manager and some other people in the company very clearly about all the things that were told to him in that meeting. So more information from my end was shared. And then I said, we know which leadership worked on our contracts. He did not sit there and write them, for the record. We know which leadership constantly sat in VC playing games with staff instead of working on time-sensitive tasks for events and debuts. This is something that I brought up multiple times. There were staff members that I couldn't get a hold of at times, or were supposed to be working on a thing and I knew it was taking time. And I mentioned something to someone else who was also NDA'd, and they said, a couple of names have been in VCs playing nothing but certain games all day. And I said, can you show me proof? And they would check in throughout the day and send regular screenshots going, yep, still in VC, yep, still screen sharing this game. You know, do I think people should be allowed to play games? Sometimes, absolutely. But when people are waiting on some shit, come on. When you're getting paid as a full-time employee, when funding, we're owed money. Funds are getting paid for you to sit there and do that. I brought this up and said, this is happening. You have full-time employees doing this. And this is without me knowing that the company was so in debt. I was just bringing it up because I was like, yo, you got workers doing this. And one of my complaints at the time was just, I don't feel like I get this many full-time employees worth of support for all of us. And I'm noticing this as well. This is a problem. It was me pointing that out. This wasn't even about the money at the time, you know? And I was aware of this, and I made people aware of this many, many, many months ago. Continuing, there's 2 more lines. I said, we know which staff consistently leaked information about talent. Yeah, several of us had our trust breached so many times. A lot of my projects were getting talked about at events because I would have a friend message me and go, oh my God, I was at this event and I heard about this thing. That's so cool. And I would go, what do you mean you heard about that thing? This is only something that I discussed in my Discord and with my own staff. And they'd be like, yeah, I saw a picture of like this merch item you got coming up. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then they would tell me certain staff members' names, or sometimes they'd just say a staff member showed me this thing, told me about that thing, which is terrible. There were times that some people did things physically and didn't want it to be known, that they were like going to this one dinner or something like that. That was talked about to random people that shouldn't have known. Stuff like that. Just completely breaching privacy to a horrific degree. Again, we're VTubers, right? We don't talk about this stuff. We trust our company to protect this stuff. There was one person who I know doesn't show themselves anywhere, but went to a dinner, and I heard a staff member say to a bunch of people who are not NDA'd, who are not part of this, who shouldn't have known, oh yeah, I saw so-and-so here. Why? I brought this up again. I want this to be known. I brought these things up when they happened, typically. I don't know who even heard about it. I don't know how far up the chain this was known. I'm pretty sure they knew, though. I remember when I first joined, one person who was leaking a lot of proprietary information was taken care of, and I was glad about that, but others were not. And I wasn't even, the thing is, some of these people I liked, like on a personal level, I liked. I didn't even want them to like have anything crazy done. I was just like, can you talk to them and make sure this doesn't happen? And nothing changed. I just kept hearing this stuff all the time. And okay, last line of my reply, I said, as the CEO, you are the final check, yes, but this means that all checks before you failed to. That's it, right? And again, I wouldn't say that all staff are bad or anything like that. There are plenty of people who could not have done anything about some of this stuff, who wouldn't have known about some of this stuff. But there's more than one person complicit. I just didn't like that this statement made it look like it was one. And the thing is, there will be some situations where I won't be able to point fingers because I at this time do not know exactly who did what thing, exactly who said what thing, but I do know what happened and a lot of results of this. And I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like there were times where I learned more about VShojo from un-NDA'd acquaintances of mine than I did from staff themselves, because they would just like blab to everyone at times, straight up. That's another problem. You know how many people told me things and I was like, hey, you shouldn't tell me that. You're under NDA. And they would go, actually, I'm not. Do you know how many people I learned were working with us on different projects, on different things, and didn't have NDAs? People would be getting handed art of my new model that no one had seen to make an item or something, right, relating to it. And they wouldn't be under NDA. And I didn't know that. And I found out at some point and I said, hey, this is sloppy as fuck. You need to hand NDAs to these people. And there's one company where I did a little test. I said, you need to NDA people in this company before I work with them. They said, okay. They NDA'd everyone except for one person. That person told me, oh yeah, they got everyone but me. And I said, okay, don't say anything. We'll see if they do it. And they never did. To this day, they never did. They didn't get thorough about it and say, let's make sure that everyone in this company is NDA'd. And it's like one of the main people. And I trust this person, so that's why I said, fuck it. We'll see if they do it. I was just talking to them like, we'll see. They have an NDA with me, so I was like, all right. But I was like, let's see if the company gets you. They did not. There are people who had no contracts with them to do certain types of work. Not just NDAs, no contract. Zero. Money's being exchanged, work is being done, but there's no contract relating to it. It's just like, let's just do everything off of vibes, dog. And this was why when I saw, the chart of how many staff we had and how many employees we had full-time, they were listed as full-time employees. I looked at this and I went, how do we have so many full-time employees yet these types of unthoroughness moments are appearing in front of me? How is this possible? And I asked this a long time ago. And I pointed this out to other members too, because we all got showed some of the same information about like how many employees we had, what was being paid toward certain things. And I said, hey, do you feel like you get this many employees worth of support and work done? Because there are employees that I do see working every day. There are people that I do see, I communicate with, I know they're doing stuff. And they look overworked as shit. And they're great. And we talk about them, like I see them. But there's a lot more in that number of people that are supposedly working full time than I know personally. And we're kept very separate from a lot of them. We really just talk to our individual managers. And if we talk to anyone in leadership, it's a couple meetings. It's if we ask for a meeting, we don't really interface with them much. So why isn't that money just, I don't know. Maybe some of these people did things that I didn't know about, that I didn't see much. But some of the functions that I didn't really see were things that I had issues with. I was like, I need certain reports on certain things, or I need to get certain information. Can I have that? And you would think when there's a full-time employee working in a certain department and you ask for information from that department, that they'd have that information done, because that's their whole job, especially when they have multiple people in certain departments. And then when you get told, yeah, we'll see if we can get that information for you, and then a week later you get a shitty spreadsheet that looks half cobbled together. I mean, it looked like more time was spent making it look nice than actually putting tangible information in it. I mean, I had so many complaints. And the thing is, maybe these people were doing other bits of work that I couldn't see, but I had no visibility on it. And that was my problem. I was like, I want to know what people are doing, because I don't want to complain until I know, like, I can complain about this. But instead, I'm just sitting here showing where the red flags are and then getting nothing. No one was as concerned as I was to make sure that talent could also know these things. Some of the staff that I did know, that I did contact, they couldn't answer those questions for me because they also did not have this information and were kept in the dark. So like, when everyone is on their own little islands, what are they supposed to do? And that's just how things were. So I, put on my business hat and was trying to help where I could, was trying to flag things, was talking to managers and going, hey, do you see this too? Because I didn't want to be an asshole bringing up shit that wasn't a problem. Maybe someone went, oh, I do know that employee, they do a lot. Oh, this department does this all the time. Here's some responsibilities they take care of that they do all the time. But I didn't get any of that back. I got one org chart that had a couple bullet points of this person handles this. And I was like, really? Because I don't get those things. So, And I got that recently. I was asking for an org chart and it took them months. It took them so many months to hand me one. I'm sorry, but if you have staff to the degree that you say you do, shouldn't you just have an org chart? Even just a list of employees and what their responsibilities are. That's not like beautifully made. It's just a spreadsheet. Shouldn't you just have some of these things? You would think, which I feel like I've been saying a lot this week. You would think HR should be able to print that in 5 minutes. You would think. When I say, hey, how much stock do I have of my merch items right now? You would think they'd be able to get me that in a day. But you know how many times we went in and out with different merch staff and it was constantly new people trying to onboard themselves and not being able to help the way they wanted to because they were like relearning stuff because we just had new people coming in. right? And no one would sit there and onboard. There were a lot of staff members who told me that they were learning their jobs kind of as they go because they weren't onboarded very well. There were people who were trying to onboard, but they weren't the ones doing that work. So they were doing their best, but they couldn't, they couldn't help these people to the degree that they needed it. A lot of people, it felt like, were just thrown at problems, and then in recent times, I'd say the past year, a lot of this stuff that I was bringing up to leadership, I started pointing out issues, a long while ago. And so people were brought in to help leadership, and they were just thrown in front of these problems. And I spent time sitting in meetings with people that were interim leadership, telling them as best I knew how different things in the company worked, basically onboarding them to some of the issues that we had and updating them on what these issues were, even though I'd already talked about them, so that they could start trying to handle the issues. Because they just got put in there. They were just installed. They were just put there. Hey, help us get on track. Hey, here, do this. And I would sit there in meetings with them and say, hey, I know you have good intent, but let me let you know how cooked it is and what the situation is as far as I know. You probably have other information I don't, but here's what I've got. Sitting there in meetings, onboarding people, me. And then you make a tweet saying we made our best efforts to right the ship. I made my best efforts. Are you kidding me? Brother. And I didn't want to do any of that. Like, I didn't get there to do that. I was like, oh, I'll advise a little. I'll make some suggestions, and surely we'll have the funding and staff to do this stuff as promised. It's unreal. I spent so much time doing that shit. And I knew a lot of it was lost on them, but I did it because of my friends, because of the other members. If it were just me, if this were a company I signed with and I didn't care about the group of people and some of the staff that I worked with, I wouldn't have done any of it, I would have just been like, oh, this shit's cooked, and I would have left. But I had people around me who I was like, let me see if I can make things at least a little better for them. So I tried, instead of just getting in there. And then once I was in there and got to see more information, instead of just bouncing, I was like, well, see what we can do. And I'll be honest with you, I had the ability the whole time. If I wanted to leave at any time, I could have. I made sure that I was taken care of in a way where I could have just said, if I need to bounce, I can bounce. So me staying was just me trying the whole time. And I didn't think I was gonna make everything perfect at all. Nowhere near, but at least a little better, right? And again, being fed information of money going in and out, but not what the current balance is, not what the current actual debts are, stuff like that, right? So I was aware that some stuff was a little cooked, but it looked like it was on a path to become like this later, not that it was going to be like this, and it already was. The debts were never mentioned, of course. This isn't new to me, I've seen this before. So I went into it, again, like I said, I negotiated a lot of my contract. I went into it in a way where I was going to be a bit more protected. I spent a really long time working on all of that to make sure, like I said, I could get in and get out if I needed, hoping that I wouldn't have to. Anyway, I want to talk about that because there was the tweet that was posted today, and I just, oof. Did you and the other talents talk and be like, hey, have you been paid? Because I haven't been paid. There were a lot of talks, and there were some people I didn't bother because they didn't seem to be having the same issues. There was a lot of stuff where at the time I didn't know that everyone had these issues. I thought it was just some people. So at first I just talked to some people. At some point I hit everyone up once, and was just like, what are your thoughts on stuff right now? And just kind of collected thoughts. And anyone who was really feeling not good about this stuff, not hopeful, I started talking to more. That was before understanding that there was debts involved like that. Is it possible to make your own company do things right? Maybe I should start my own thing. No, I think there are definitely things that I want to help people with, and the other things I don't want to touch. Thanks, Sakura. But there are things I don't want to touch, and I know very clearly what those are. There's some stuff that I will do to help people. Yeah, there's some things that I'm gonna work on. For sure, you guys have known since I was in the company, since before I was in the company, I always had my own projects I've been working on. A lot of stuff that you might see me release is not just an answer to this. It's stuff that I've been working on for a long time. I do know what is actually needed and what's totally unnecessary, and I'll help with what I think is needed.
They brought you on to be a full-time talent, but ended up making you be their management consultant. Might as well form GEEGA, and Gay League Incorporated.
I say I spent a lot of time, but that's from my perspective. At the same time, there was a lot of time I just said, fuck it, I'm just gonna let them try to handle it. So, and the fourth thing was actually Monster Hunter, but they didn't do any real work on it. They facilitated the initial discussion. So technically, they quote unquote got that for me, quote unquote. I already had my own contacts, but they went through VShojo regardless. And then all of the work related to the Monster Hunter debut, getting the model, whatever, was all done by me and my own team. Those 4 were the only things that they may have received money for relating to me. But yeah, I do a lot of sponsorships, and almost all of them are facilitated by me, myself, and my own team. So the merch stuff was also, if they did it through their system, they would receive the merch money and then pay me out. That would be the system there. But if I did merch with a third-party company or something, then there's a good chance that they would pay me out, and then I would pay them their cut, which wasn't a problem. Again, I've seen some people say stuff about like merch, like that was some sort of catalyst or something. We were always allowed to work with whoever we wanted, third-party companies, and then all that mattered was like making sure the legal stuff was handled. So if they are owed a cut, I make sure I calculate and give that cut to them, or vice versa. If they do it, they have to give that cut to me that I'm owed. But it didn't really matter to them who I worked with, whether or not it was like on their shop or anything like that. That was never actually a big point of friction. The only thing was just that their cut was like what it was, no matter where you did it. So you just had to make sure that you calculated that, right? I don't know. I've seen a lot of people like talking about merch like that was a huge issue. I think it's just old speculation because there wasn't a lot of information before. But yeah, that was not like... I think the way stuff was executed was a point of friction, but not like being able to work with someone else was not an issue.